T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit sick.
T9C got the fucking juice.
Silver's the new gold.
Chris is shit sick.
Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of JT Sports Live. I'm your host, JT. Hope everybody's doing well today. UNLV football. Man, you don't really hear the Rebels talked about that much in the national media, but a story came out late last night that their starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, is redshirting. He's choosing to quit on the team in this season due to unfulfilled NIL promises by UNLV. Apparently, they offered him a lump sum of money to come transfer to play for the Rebels, and he's only received $3,000 of that. And of course, this has made national headlines. Everybody's talking about it. Is he a quitter? Is this the right decision on his behalf? And on this episode, I want to give my thoughts on this situation. What side do I stand on? Also, the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys are playing on Thursday Night Football. I'm not really that excited for this game, but the main reason why I'm gonna tune in is because Malik Nabers and Trevon Diggs got into it on social media during this offseason. And Trevon Diggs was talking a lot of smack to Malik Nabers, and Malik Nabers has been balling out so far this season. And Trevon Diggs, to me, he's the most overrated corner in the NFL. The praise he receives isn't really warranted for the inconsistent play that he tends to have from time to time. And we could see Malik Nabers absolutely embarrass Trevon Diggs Thursday night. The Minnesota Vikings are dominating with Sam Darnold at quarterback this year, but believe it or not, this is not the first time that the Vikings have taken the NFL by storm with a journeyman at the helm. I'm going to break down why the current success that the Vikings are having with Sam Darnold is sustainable, and they could have one of the best seasons that we've seen them have in recent memory. I got some thoughts on Lane Kiffin. Should he leave Ole Miss? Is it possible for him to win a national championship down there in Oxford? There's a big secret about Kalen DeBoer that Alabama is hiding from you. They don't want anybody to know this, but I'm going to spill the beans. I got 5 college football teams that so far this season have not lived up to the hype. And USC, man, they got a brutal welcoming into the Big Ten Conference. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching, YouTube, X. Do me a favor, smash that like button, follow and subscribe, turn on post notifications if you haven't already so you don't miss when we go live and when we drop new content. Please, I beg of you, give the JT Sports Podcast a 5-star review. We are not just a YouTube channel. You can find this episode and all of our previous episodes on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcast from. Check out the JT Sports Podcast. Give us a 5-star review. Giving us a 5-star review is like donating $1,000 to the channel, man. I plan on, in the next couple of weeks, pitching this podcast to ESPN and a couple of other networks. And before I do that, I want to make sure that I can get my analytics up, my podcast numbers look a little bit better. So help your brother out. Give us a 5-star review. I know a lot of y'all out there listening to podcasts, man. Stop being stubborn. It only takes about 10, 15 seconds to do. Give the JT Sports Podcast a 5-star review. Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. And follow us on Instagram at JT Sports _ and on X at JT Sports _ You can submit your NFL and college football questions in the DMs. They will be answered on a future episode. Let's dive into it, man. College football is absolutely insane right now. I remember a time when players opting out of bowl games was fairly new. It was taking everybody by surprise, and people were really upset with it. Now we go from players opting out of bowl games to keep themselves from getting injured, protecting their draft status, to now opting out on the season, quitting on their team due to unfulfilled NIL promises. Welcome to college football in 2024, people. So UNLV football, they currently are 3-0, and right now, in my opinion, they are the current front runners to get that 12 seed, being a G5 team in the upcoming expanded college football playoffs. However, their season has just taken a massive turn with their starting quarterback, Matthew Sluka, choosing to sit out for the rest of this season, redshirting due to unfulfilled NIL promises by UNLV's collective. According to reports out there, he was promised $100,000 when he transferred to UNLV. And you know how much they've only given him out of that? Only $3,000. And let's not get this twisted. This man is quitting on his team, his teammates, his coaches. He may not have had the best season in the world from a statistical standpoint. He had 7 total touchdowns, 6 through the air, 1 on the ground, and 1 interception, but he's completing under 50% of his passes. But it's just the fact that when you are on the team, you commit to play somewhere, you're supposed to give your all to said program. And when you just flat out leave and quit on them right in the smack dab middle of their best season, damn near ever, it really is a bad look on the player. But in this situation, though, I don't see how you can be mad at Matthew Sluka for choosing to make this decision not to play. And of course, he's going to hit the portal and he's going to run it back with another team next year if anybody picks him up. And the reason why you can't be mad at him is because UNLV promised this dude some money and they didn't live up to their end of the bargain. And when you get paid to do a job, you expect to get all of your compensation that was promised. It doesn't matter if there weren't any papers, it wasn't documented. When somebody commits to play for you based off a promise that you give them and you don't live up to it, of course they're going to end up leaving and going elsewhere because you just lied to them. You deceived them. That's like saying you're going to work at a job that is going to pay you $100,000 a year. They promise you this salary, right? Even though it wasn't documented, nothing was agreed upon on paper, you know, you're still working for that job based off the promise that they made to you. So when they don't uphold that promise, are you still obligated to work for them? Because to me, I wouldn't work for a job that just flat out lied to my face. First of all, it's unethical. And this business, deceiving players, puts a bad stain on your football program. You just promised Sluka all this money, and then out of nowhere, you don't have it, and you're not going to pay him everything. Why would any other player want to transfer to your school? Why would any other player trust you after what you just did in this situation? It's easy to come at this guy online, call him a quitter, call him a little B word, but this is a situation where we all should be on Matthew Sluka's side. This was the prime example of why name, image, and likeness is a big problem to the state of college football. We just need to be honest about what college football is right now. It's the NFL. Just doesn't have the three-letter words that are the NFL. It just has CFB instead, but there's no regulations over this thing. Nobody gets penalized for deceiving these guys who come to play for said money and they don't get paid. And you can say it's the player's fault all you want to, but at the end of the day, when you get promised something, there is no excuse that you can make for the other program being unethical. Because at the end of the day, there are some morals that goes into this thing. You don't promise somebody something, get them on your team, and then you just flat out say, you know what, we're going to pull the rug from underneath you and go back on our promise. Because there probably were some other schools out there that may not have been giving Matthew Sluka $100K guarantee, but they were promising him $50,000, maybe $70,000. So not only did you just lie to this dude, make him come to your school and not pay him what you promised him to, but you also forced him to miss out on other money that he could have gotten paid elsewhere. Selfishness. You can call Matthew Sluka in this situation selfish, but you can also say the same thing for UNLV football. All they cared about was making sure that they got him on their team and not honoring their commitment. Both sides, to me, you know, one is right, one is wrong. The right side of this thing is Matthew Sluka's side. I agree with him. I'm not about to come play for you if you promise me money and you don't hold up your end of the deal. Why would I want to play for a liar? Why would I want to play for a program that doesn't honor their word? This is a bad operation that UNLV is running right now. Of course, they're going to deny this. They're going to try to spin it around, but this is the first, and it won't be the last situation of this. There are plenty of players that are probably going through the same thing. The only difference is they love the game so much that they probably don't want to quit. But Matthew Sluka, he has one more year of college football. He might not make it to the next level, so you want to get as much money as possible. Which makes sense because if I know that I'm not going to have a playing career past the collegiate level, it makes sense for me to get as much life-changing money as possible. So therefore, I'm not about to waste any of my time playing for a school that's not going to pay me what they promised. I'm going to just redshirt the rest of the season, save my 1 year left of eligibility, and go to a school that actually is going to give me the financial compensation promised. This was a bad mishandling of NIL by UNLV's collective. It's Vegas. You mean to tell me you were in Las Vegas, the city of angels, and nobody has $100K to give this dude? I mean, come on, what kind of operation are we running down there? For the people that are saying that Matthew Sluka's wrong for quitting on his team, you mean to tell me you wouldn't do the same thing? You went to a school that you may not have been interested in playing for if it wasn't for the financial promises that they gave you. Therefore, you're stuck playing on a team that you never wanted to play for to begin with because they didn't want to pay you what was promised. That's like saying, I'm going to pay you $1 million to live in the worst area of Chicago. You move to that area, and instead of them giving you $1 million, they decide to just give you $50,000. That wasn't part of the deal. Why you finna have me in a situation that I didn't want to be in, but I only put myself here because of the money you promised me? You can say, well, JT, don't chase the money. Go to the place you really want to go to. But I hate when people say that because we know that money makes the world go around, okay? And let's not make it seem like it's easy to pass up on a team that's offering you more than the others. Nobody just goes into the portal, gets these kind of offers and says to themselves, oh yeah, like there's a chance they just might not pay me. You know, these are grown men, these are grown adults working in these roles that are offering these young kids, and you would think that they would be honorable to their word and hold up their commitments. If you're not about to pay a dude what you promised them to, he's not obligated to continue to play for you. This is the new age of college football, people. Everybody wanted this. Everybody wanted players to get paid. They wanted them to get money from their name, image, and likeness. And look at the repercussions of this. You see, nobody ever foreseen this coming. But now that it's happened, everybody now is kind of going back and saying, oh man, maybe NIL wasn't as good as what we thought it was. Because you see, everything in life starts out perfect, but then people take it further. They got to step it up a notch. Escalation, right? We went from players just wanting to get paid to now the transfer portal pretty much becoming the equivalent to what free agency is in the NFL. When you went to the transfer portal, you're looking to get paid. I've talked to players that have played for several Division I schools, G5, Power 5, and a lot of them who have played at lower level universities have told me that the first chance they get at being able to make a good sum of money from transferring to another program, they're taking the opportunity. There is no loyalty in college football. Most people in life are loyal to the money because money makes the world go around. When it comes to the battle of morality versus money, money wins every single time. There is no morals when it comes to money, and this is the prime example why. UNLV, they lied to this dude. He probably wanted to go to another school, but only changed his decision because of what they were offering him. Now he's stuck in a situation that he probably didn't want to be in if it wasn't for the promise that they went to give him that is now unfulfilled. You can't be mad at this kid. I agree with them, and we all should. If my job promises me a certain salary, I clock in and I don't get what I was promised, I'm leaving too. I'm quitting. I'm not about to put blood, sweat, and tears into a place that just flat out lied to me because you're not worth any of my blood, sweat, and tears. You're a liar. You're a manipulator. You manipulated me to come to your school with the premise that you were going to pay me a set amount of money that you never intended to honor. Why would I want to continue to play for your team? F your great season that you're having, at the potential possibility of you making it to the college football playoffs. I don't give a rat's darn about anything you got going on because you don't care enough about me to honor your word. Why should anybody be siding against Matthew Sluka when he was the one who was wronged in this situation? I agree with them. You offered me the $100,000 to come play for your university. You only gave me $3,000 of that. Until you give me the rest of all that money you promised me, you will never see me suit up for your school ever again. And this is a bad message to send to the other potential players that you could be targeting in the portal next year, because they could say, if they did this to Matthew Sluka, why can't they do this to me? Let's move on. Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings have been the biggest story in the NFL this year. They are just dominating everybody. They beat the 49ers. They clobbered the Houston Texans last week. And it's surprising to see Minnesota having so much success with Sam Darnold at quarterback. This is a journeyman. He's been around the block. The New York Jets, the Carolina Panthers, the 49ers, and it has now taken him, 7-8 years into the league to finally be put in a good situation. And when it comes to if this is just our early season good story that's going to fade once we get into November, late December, the Minnesota Vikings end up collapsing, coming back down to earth, Sam Darnold's play declines, I don't see that happening. Because I don't know how many of you guys remember this, but in 2017, the Vikings went to the NFC Conference Championship game with Case Keenum at quarterback. This is not the first time that the Vikings have dominated the league with the journeyman quarterback. At the start of the 2017 season, Sam Darnold was the start. Well, Sam Bradford, was the starter. And he played in 2 games. They went 2-0 during that stretch. And like always, Sam, made of glass Bradford, got injured. And Case Keenum came in. And at this time, he bounced around. He was on St. Louis, started out with the Houston Texans, and he ends up getting the start for Minnesota. He leads them to the NFC North title. They end up winning the division. They go 13-3 in the process. He also throws the Minneapolis Miracle Ball to Trevon Diggs against New Orleans, and they end up getting blasted by the Philadelphia Eagles in the conference championship game, but he was really good during that season. 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He threw for 3,547 passing yards. They had a great defense. Mike Zimmer was still the head coach during that time, and his defenses were actually good during this year. And it was a large reason why the Vikings had the success that they did in 2017. Nobody really expected for Minnesota to be as good as what they were in 2017 with Sam Bradford starting. And when he got injured, all hope was lost. And Case Keenum and the Vikings just proved everybody wrong. They had one of the best records in the league at that time. And it looks like the Minnesota Vikings are doing the same thing that they did in 2017 this season, being able to win with Sam Darnold. The talent has always been there with Sam. He's pretty good outside the pocket, decent athlete, pretty accurate inside of the numbers, but he has really elevated his game to a level that we haven't seen before. And in the NFL, everybody develops at a different rate. Now you only got 2, maybe 3 years to prove that you actually have the capability to be an elite quarterback before a team ends up moving off of you. And sometimes it may take a guy 5, maybe 8 years to reach his potential. In the NBA, it happens all the time. You got guys that get drafted 20, 21 years old, only 1 year out of college, and their first 5, 6 years in the NBA, they don't really do anything. And then they get into their 7th, 8th year, and all of a sudden, they're an all-star, and they become one of the best players at their position. In the NFL, you can see the same thing happen with quarterbacks. Geno Smith, it took him damn near a decade plus to finally start playing some good football. Baker Mayfield, it's taking him a while to play up to his potential. For certain guys, it doesn't always click right away. It's also about the situation that they get put in. Sam Darnold has played in some really dysfunctional situations. Adam Gase as his head coach with the Jets. The Carolina Panthers weren't really that good. The 49ers, he was nothing better than a backup. But with the Minnesota Vikings, they have taken this dude, put all their confidence in him, and they given him a really good team around him. You got Justin Jefferson on pace to be an all-time great. You got a good offensive line. You got one of the best offensive minds in the league, and Kevin O'Connell. Don't just look at this Minnesota success story with Sam Darnold as something that just is a flash in the pan, because they actually do have the capability to carry this momentum all throughout this season. Are they going to be a Super Bowl contender? Probably not, but they definitely are more than equipped to win a playoff game or two, because they've done this before in 2017 with Case Keenum. Justin Fields is playing the best football of his NFL career right now. We're 4 weeks in to him being QB1 for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and what's scary is that I don't even think that the Steelers have fully unleashed Justin Fields yet. He's yet to play his best football, and that's what should terrify a lot of people, a lot of teams in the NFL, because right now the Steelers have played things pretty safe with Justin Fields up to this point, but it seems like week after week, they're starting to have more confidence in him. They're starting to ask him to do a little bit more. Last week against the Los Angeles Chargers, he was throwing the football more times than he did in the first 2 weeks. They got more confidence in him throwing the football downfield now than what they did in week 1. He also has played some really good football in the fourth quarter of these games. Although he isn't lighting up the stat sheet, he only has 3 total touchdowns, 2 through the air, 1 through the ground, but he only has 1 interception. And the big fatal flaw that costed Justin Fields his job in Chicago is that he was the worst fourth quarter quarterback in the NFL. When you got into the final 15 minutes of games, you could not trust Justin Fields. He was the worst quarterback when it came to performing in the last 15 minutes of games, led the NFL in fourth quarter turnovers, had the worst completion percentage in the fourth quarter of games. But now with the Pittsburgh Steelers, he goes to Mike Tomlin, a head coach that believes in him, says that we want you, Justin. You can play your style of football. You don't have to be scared of making a mistake because you're in a better situation now. We're not going to scapegoat you. If we lose, it's not because of you. It's because of us. We're a team. And what happens when you take a talented player that has untapped potential from a bad situation and you put him into a stable franchise like the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is one of the gold standards for how to run a pretty consistent franchise when it comes to always having a winning record and being a consistent playoff team, you get the performance that you're seeing out of Justin Fields so far this season. And he's having a career high in completion percentage at 73.3%. And eventually, as we continue to move throughout this NFL season, you're going to see Justin Fields end up playing at a better level than what he did to start this season, because the Steelers have more confidence in him now than what they did when they first started him, because initially their main goal was to just win enough games, do enough until Russ gets healthy. Well, now Russ is starting to near 100%, and Mike Tomlin, it doesn't look like he has any plans of switching up at quarterback. Justin Fields has the hot hand right now. He has surprised his organization. He probably has surprised the team with how well he's played. And with him playing so well, you're going to start seeing Arthur Smith start to cook more things up that are going to be a little bit more aggressive. We might see him relied upon more on the ground. He's not running the football as much with the Steelers as what he was in Chicago. And eventually, I expect that to change. There's been games for the Chicago Bears when Justin Fields has had like 4 or 5 total touchdowns. He's unstoppable throwing the football. He's unstoppable on the ground. We've yet to really see a game this year that Justin Fields has completely exploded as the Steelers quarterback, and that is what's so terrifying to me. You know, the Steelers, they recently came out, and, you know, it was a rumor that said that they are keeping close tabs on the wide receiver market. They're looking to bring another weapon for Justin Fields to throw the football to. Imagine if you got George Pickens and Devontae Adams at wide receiver. Do you not know how scary this offense could be with another good receiver? And with how well Justin Fields is throwing the football, the Steelers not only have the capability of winning the AFC North this year, but they have the potential to go a little bit further in the postseason than what most of us expected coming into this year, because you're now going to have a capable offense that has a functional quarterback. And you tailor that with the already great defense that is not allowing anything more than 10 points per game. The Steelers are plotting on the NFL. They're trying to quietly assemble a Super Bowl caliber team, and a lot of you all are not even paying attention to the moves that they're making. You know, you got Roman Wilson coming back healthy. You get another good outside receiver. You got Roman in the slot. You got GP on the outside. And if you can get a Devontae Adams or just a reliable number one, number two option, better than Van Jefferson and whoever you got out there, this can be a really scary team with the fact that Justin Fields has yet to play his best football up to this point. And that's what scares me, because the reason why I believe that Justin Fields is a better option at quarterback than Russell Wilson is because you don't know just how truly good Justin Fields is. That's why Chicago moved on from him, because they weren't willing to wait another season to see if he could figure it out to reach his potential. Well, over the next couple of weeks, I expect to see Justin Fields having some really big games when he just lights the NFL on fire, because those performances that he used to have when he was a Bear against the Detroit Lions and the Atlanta Falcons were a little bit of a glimpse of what he could be if he can sustain that level of play consistently. So I'm really excited to see what the Steelers have in store with this plan that they are having with Justin Fields. I think a lot of people should be extremely terrified right now what's going on in Pittsburgh. Now, the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys are playing on Thursday Night Football this week. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not really that excited about this game. I don't really care about the New York Giants. I don't care to watch Daniel Jones, and I could care less about watching the Dallas Cowboys right now. They've been playing some really unwatchable football, but the only reason that I am invested in watching this game is because of the beef between Giants standout rookie wide receiver Malik Nabers and Dallas Cowboys cornerback Trevon Diggs. So for those of you guys who weren't keeping up with the beef between these two in the offseason, they had some words that were exchanged on social media. Trevon Diggs was talking a lot of trash to Malik Nabers, and now it's time for Trevon Diggs to back up his smack talk. And I believe it was a really bad decision on Trevon Diggs' behalf to poke the monster that is Malik Nabers. This dude is just a specimen at the wide receiver position. I've never seen a wideout have his kind of strength, explosiveness, and aggressiveness coming off the line. When he gets the ball in his hands, this dude becomes a running back. He's an unstoppable force out there in the open field, and a lot of defensive backs hate tackling this dude. And right now, he's on pace to have a historical rookie season. 23 catches, 271 receiving yards. He already has 3 receiving touchdowns. This is the New York Giants offense, all right? And the only reason worth watching the Giants for is to watch this amazing specimen that is Malik Nabers. This dude is going to completely embarrass Trevon Diggs in this game. Trevon Diggs, he's a solid corner, but he's not as good as what Cowboy fans hype him up to be. I don't think he's an elite corner. I believe that he's a top 15 corner, but he doesn't belong in the same conversation as a Patrick Surtain or a Jair Alexander. And for one, it's because he's pretty inconsistent. And I remember watching a Thursday night game when the Cowboys secondary got torched by DK Metcalf last year. And Malik Nabers, with all of the trash talk that he was getting from Trevon Diggs, he's going to make him eat his words. Because we know that Trevon Diggs, he has the tendency to get beat on double moves. He tends to be really aggressive when it comes to trying to bait quarterbacks into throwing interceptions, and it costs them. And when it goes into this matchup, or when it comes to this matchup with Malik Nabers and him, I just don't think he's going to be able to slow this dude down. If you are a fantasy football owner, expect a 30, 40-point performance out of Malik Nabers, man, because Trevon Diggs doesn't know what he just got himself into. One thing that you never do is poke the bear, and that's exactly what Trevon Diggs did. And one thing about the Dallas Cowboys is that you would think for a team that gets as much national spotlight as what they get, despite not being that good, not being to a Super Bowl since VHS tapes were around, the players wouldn't talk as much smack. But Trevon Diggs was running his mouth on social media, and Malik Nabers is about to make this dude look completely terrible Thursday night. So if you were thinking about not tuning in to this Thursday night game, you got a reason to tune in. Watch the Malik Nabers show. Grab you some popcorn. Get you a soda. And just watch Malik Nabers go to work on the NFL's most overrated cornerback. Because last year, this defense got torched by DK Metcalf. Everybody was gassing up DaRon Bland when he came in and filled in for Trevon Diggs when he ended up getting his season cut short. And that defense got torched that night. They were able to win that game some way, somehow, but it was a close win, and it was an embarrassing performance out of Dallas secondary. And Malik Nabers, he could have the exact same game that we saw DK Metcalf have last year when the Dallas Cowboys were playing Seattle on Thursday Night Football. So just look out for the Malik Nabers versus Trevon Diggs beef. You know, it was definitely something that I was excited about going into this year. A lot of people haven't really been talking about it. So I'm excited to see what Trevon Diggs is about to allow happen to him against Malik Nabers. I love me some Malik Nabers, man. This dude is an absolute stud. Before we move on to the college football section of this live stream, I want to shout out everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching. Shout out to M Sparks, my guy, Pays and Plays Podcast. Shout out to my guy, Sammy. I ain't going to try to butcher the second half of your name. He says Steelers winning the North. Browns got shitty quarterback. Bengals 0-3. Ravens always choking. It's 1-2. We'll see. Do me a favor. Like that. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on post notifications if you haven't already. And give us a 5-star review, man. Please give us a 5-star review. I know a lot of y'all listen to podcasts out there. If you haven't already, give the JT Sports Podcast a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. The link is down in the description down below. Giving us a 5-star review is the equivalent to giving us $1,000. I plan on pitching this podcast to ESPN and Fox Sports and a few other big media companies. And before I do that, I want to make sure that I have some better analytics. And if I can get to 100 5-star reviews, that would greatly increase my chances of being able to make the moves that I'm trying to make. So just do me a favor. Give the JT Sports Podcast a 5-star review. It only takes 15, 30 seconds to do, and it will greatly help out the pod and the channel, and I appreciate your support. Let's move on to some college football. There's been a lot of talk around Lane Kiffin's future with Ole Miss football as their head coach. As we know, Lane Kiffin has a storied past of jumping ship, going team to team out of nowhere. But it seems like he has found the home down there in Oxford, Mississippi with the Rebels. They are having their best stretch of football in program history under Lane Kiffin. But there's been a lot of smoke around him leaving Ole Miss for Florida. And when you ask people, why does it make sense for Lane Kiffin to take the Florida Gators job despite how down they've been these last couple of years and how much of a mess their NIL collective has been, they tell you Lane Kiffin has a better chance of winning a national championship at Florida versus what he does at Ole Miss. And they pretty much tell you that he doesn't have a shot at winning a national championship as the head coach of Ole Miss football, but he has a great chance to win it at Florida, even though it's going to require a rebuild. I don't agree with that. He's done a really good job at Ole Miss of building that team up through recruiting and also utilizing the transfer portal. And this year's Ole Miss team is built similarly to what last year's Florida State team was. You know, you got a few recruits that you've developed, but you also got a few transfer portal guys that are going to be one and done. So they're going to be drafted high in the NFL draft next year. But not everybody that Lane Kiffin has gotten from the transfer portal is just one and done. He's also got a good amount of players from the portal that he has taken in. He is developing them, and he's not trying to make them stars right away, but he's trying to develop them so they can become stars within the span of the next 2-3 years. So you got somebody that is doing a great job of leveraging recruiting in the transfer portal, but also making sure that he's just not looking for guys in the transfer portal who can just produce right away. He's looking for guys in the portal that he can develop to become contributors for this squad later down the road. And with this new age of college football, you know, I think that this is going to be a recipe that a lot of other coaches are going to start taking and utilizing at different programs that aren't really known for having a lot of top-notch facilities. With the playoffs expanding to 12 teams and with how unpredictable college football tends to be, there is a chance that Ole Miss could win it all this year. Now, we haven't seen them play any good teams this year. They've been playing some low-level FBS, FCS schools, but this is a team that is more than capable of being able to win the SEC this year because they got a favorable schedule. And if you can take advantage of having the easiest schedule in this conference, you can somehow win the SEC title game. You give yourself a first-round bye in the college football playoffs. You know, I don't think that with the playoffs expanding anymore, it's impossible to win a natty at a certain school just because they don't have as much resources as what a other bigger program like Florida does. Kalen DeBoer had the 34th rated roster according to 24/7 Sports Team Talent Composite rankings last year and took the Huskies to the national championship. And during that stretch, they beat Dan Lanning and Oregon twice that season that they went to the Natty. And Oregon had a vastly more superiorly talented roster than what Kalen DeBoer had at Washington. But Kalen DeBoer is a great coach. He's able to get guys that fit his scheme, and he can elevate them with his coaching. Lane Kiffin has the ability to do the same thing. And if Lane Kiffin is as good as a head coach as what most of us hype him up to be, then he should be able to elevate this Ole Miss football program. If Kalen DeBoer can take Washington to the national championship 2 years removed from Jimmy Lake damn near burning that program into irrelevancy, Lane Kiffin can do the same thing at Ole Miss. There are plenty of coaches that are doing more with less, and with now 12 teams being able to get into the dance, you're going to see teams that come out of nowhere that nobody thought they could ever really be that good. They get into the playoffs and they surprise a few folks because you got coaches that don't need all these high-tech facilities. They don't need a huge NIL back collective, to be successful wherever they're at. And Lane Kiffin, there's no reason to leave your current situation for Florida because you got a really good infrastructure. You got a program that is more than willing to give you anything that you need to compete. They're willing to make changes. They're willing to make adaptations to appease you. Going to a school like Florida that has had so much dysfunction inside of their program. Look at the whole Jaden Rashada lawsuit. That should be a pretty clear indicator that Florida isn't really the most stable program in the world, and they're not really patient either. It may take you a little bit longer to rebuild Florida football than what it would take you to win a national title at Ole Miss. I'm not saying that being in the Florida landscape doesn't give Lane Kiffin a better chance to win it all than what he has at Ole Miss, but I don't really see a big benefit in him leaving Ole Miss for Florida just because you're incentivizing recruiting. Lane Kiffin thought that the grass was greener when he left OU for USC because he's in Cali. Cali's one of the 3 biggest states that produces the most high-level blue-chip prospects, and look at how USC's recruiting has kind of struggled these past couple of years until now. Just because you take a job that is perceived to be better because of where they're located in terms of recruiting, it doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to be able to maximize that recruiting potential. You know, there are other factors that go into how well a team can recruit outside of where they're located. So if I'm Lane Kiffin, I wouldn't leave Ole Miss. You don't need to leave Ole Miss to win a national championship. But if he wants to leave Ole Miss just because he loves the state of Florida, because I've talked to a few people inside of FAU's football program, and they say that Lane Kiffin, you know, he loves Florida. He has a couple of properties in Florida that he frequently visits during his hours when he has some downtime to chill and relax with his family and kids and whatnot. So I wouldn't be too surprised if he took the Florida job, but if he's taking the job because he doesn't believe he can win a natty at Ole Miss, I just don't think it's a good decision, because you definitely can win at Ole Miss with what you have right now. You got one of the highest odds to win the SEC title. So that shows you that you can build Ole Miss into a contender. Look at what you have turned them into right now. You know, a few years ago, nobody ever thought that Ole Miss could reach this level, even when they had Hugh Freeze and he was rolling. Alabama is hiding a big secret about Kalen DeBoer that a lot of you guys don't know about. When Kalen DeBoer was hired to replace Nick Saban, I felt this was the best replacement possible that Ole Miss, or I said Ole Miss. Run that back, man. Alabama is hiding a big secret about Kalen DeBoer that a lot of you guys don't know about. So when Kalen DeBoer was first hired by Alabama to replace Nick Saban, a lot of people were a little bit skeptical about this move because, let's just be honest, most people weren't really paying too much attention to Kalen DeBoer when he was at Washington, and to the Huskies really started getting mentioned more in the national spotlight. They beat Oregon and Dan Lanning twice. They made it to the national championship, and that's when everybody started to somewhat realize just how good of a head coach Kalen DeBoer is. But I don't believe enough of you folk truly understand just how good Kalen DeBoer is and how good he's going to become as the head man down there in Tuscaloosa. And in 2 seasons at Washington, he went 25-3, taking over a program that their previous head coach at the time, Jimmy Lake, almost burned to the ground. And he came in, gave it some soul, got Michael Penix, developed him, turned him into a future top 10 pick in the NFL draft, along with several other star-studded players and receivers. They go to the national championship with the 34th best roster in college football, according to 24/7 Sports Team Talent Composite rankings at the time, which is something that is unheard of. Most teams that have won the national championship, or at least have been to that game, have had a top 10 roster from a talent standpoint. So for Kalen DeBoer to do what he did at Washington, not having the same amount of resources that some of these other head coaches have access to at a big-time program, shows you how good of a coach he is, because he can do more with less. The dude was 10-1 against ranked teams at Washington. And not only was he winning at Washington, but he was winning national championships, coaching NAIA football at some school called Sioux Falls. Can you even point out Sioux Falls on the map? Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can, and I can't either. And in his 9 years of being a head coach, he's 107-12. So if you can win at all these different places, not having access to elite talent, not having a big NIL back end. Imagine what Kalen DeBoer is going to do as the head coach of Alabama football. You got some of the best facilities in America. It's easy to recruit down there. You have elite blue chip talent to work with, and you're already a great head coach. Imagine the level of dominance that Kalen DeBoer is going to have with Nick Saban being retired. You know, I truly believe, and a lot of y'all are going to disagree with me, but the big secret that Alabama is keeping away about Kalen DeBoer is that they believe he can be the second coming of Nick Saban. Now, we know that there only is one Nick Saban. I'm not saying that he's going to end up winning all the national titles that Nick Saban has, but he's going to be the closest thing to Nick Saban that college football is ever going to see again. And yes, I do know that Kirby Smart is the prodigal son and whatnot, but Kalen DeBoer, with what he has done as a head coach these last couple of years, there's no reason why he can't sustain the level of dominance that Alabama football has had with Nick Saban at the helm. He's a really good recruiter. You see the amount of success that Alabama's having on the recruiting trail right now for a guy that was going to struggle to recruit in the South because he wasn't from the area. If you're a good football coach, it doesn't matter where you're at. If you know how to recruit, you're going to be able to recruit no matter what part of the country you're at. You could be in Alaska and still be able to recruit at a high level. If you know how to coach some great football teams, you're going to be able to elevate any team that you're on just because the method that you have for being able to win works everywhere that you go. The best kept secret about Alabama and Kalen DeBoer is that he definitely is going to be the second coming to Nick Saban. People do not know just how truly good Kalen DeBoer is because they probably only found out about this dude once Washington got to the playoffs and once he took this job. But this man is an outstanding football coach, and I think he's on his way to becoming an all-time great. And I know that it is some high praise to say that a guy like Kalen DeBoer that hasn't won a national championship, that doesn't have anywhere close to the resume that Nick Saban has or even Kirby Smart has. But I really believe that Kalen DeBoer is an all-time great head coach or on his way to becoming that. Because if you can win at all these places, you can win at a school like Alabama where you're just pretty much gifted everything that you need. And if you can do more with less, imagine what you can do now that you have more. And you already are a great coach that has proven that you can do and win with less. You know, like I'm really high on Kalen DeBoer down there in Tuscaloosa. And I really don't think enough people understand how good of a coach he is. To me right now, he's the second best head coach in college football, only behind Kirby Smart. And if Alabama beats Georgia this weekend, I definitely believe that he has the right to that title of being the best coach in college football, because it's one thing to win at a school like Georgia where you got it all, but it's another thing when you've won everywhere you've been, not having the same amount of resources as these blue chip programs. You know, so Kalen DeBoer, look out for him. I think he's going to be an all-time great coach, and he easily could be the second coming of Nick Saban. There's been a couple of college football teams coming into this season that haven't lived up to the hype so far. And I want to give you guys 5 teams that so far they have been massive disappointments. We got to start off with Florida State. I mean, how can you not start off with Florida State? They were favorites to win the ACC this year. Now, going into week 5, they're fighting a different battle. They're not fighting to make it into the college football playoffs. They're fighting to finish with the record of 500. They may not even make it to a bowl game with how bad this team is. They don't have a consistent offense. They got a quarterback that is god-awful that they refuse to bench. Their defense isn't that good neither. The receivers are struggling to catch passes, create separation. Like, Florida State has just been a complete disaster this year. This team was expected to be damn near a lock to make it into the 12-team college football playoffs. And remember, they got snubbed last year. The only reason they didn't get into the playoffs last season was because Jordan Travis got injured, and they believed that they deserved to be in that thing. Well, they got smacked by Georgia, and ever since, they have just been completely on the downhill slide, and this just has been a really nightmare season for the Florida State Seminoles. And even if you believe that Florida State was going to come back down to earth somewhat, I don't even think anybody could have foreseen them being this bad. And I wasn't high on Florida State going into this season. I felt they were going to be 9-3. I didn't see them getting into the playoffs. But to tell me that Florida State was only going to have one win up to this point of this season, I would have been really surprised. I would have been like, man, like, so Florida State's going to be this bad? Like, well, why? Like, how can you be this bad when you have access to the amount of talent that they do in recruiting in the Sunshine State? How can you be this bad when you got a head coach that has shown so much promise his first 3 years, and Mike Norvell with this program? Every single year Norvell has coached this team, they have improved record-wise. So it definitely is a big surprise to see this team just decline the way they have. I mean, this is really bad. This is probably a lot more surprising than when LSU went from winning the national championship to being irrelevant with Ed Orgeron as their head coach. Kansas, this was one of those dark horse Big 12 contenders that people were hyping up going into this year. You had Jalen Daniels coming back fully healthy. You returned a lot of experience on offense. You got a really good running back coming back. You got an experienced group of wide receivers that's pretty good. But, you know, Kansas has had some really embarrassing losses. They lost to UNLV. And the main reason for why Kansas has been a massive letdown and why they haven't lived up to the hype this year is mainly because they lost their offensive coordinator, Nicolo Nicky, who is now at Penn State. And despite the amount of experience that they have on this team, when you got a lot of these veteran players learning a new system, sometimes it just doesn't click. It takes them a while to really grab a hold of this offense. And, you know, Kansas just has been a massive letdown this season. And it's not like anybody thought they were going to be a playoff team, but this was a team that people probably thought could be an 8-9 win team. At this point, they'll be lucky to make it to a bowl game this season. How about Virginia Tech, though? Outside of Miami, Virginia Tech was one of the most hyped teams in the ACC coming into this year. And there were people like myself who thought that they could be a surprise entrance into the 12-team college football playoffs this year. They returned a lot of experience from last year's team. Pretty much everybody on offense. You got better on defense. But some way, somehow, this team already has 2 surprising losses. They got beat by Rutgers. They came back, made that game close after getting blown out for the first 3 quarters. And at the start of the season, they got shocked by Vanderbilt. And most people didn't even think Vanderbilt was going to be as good as what they are this season. So Virginia Tech, you know, they've been one of the biggest disappointments of college football this year. Kyron Drones hasn't made any improvements as a passer. This is still a team that wins and loses based off how well they can run the football. Virginia Tech definitely hasn't lived up to expectations this year. And another team that has been a massive letdown is Notre Dame. You know, it seems like every season, Notre Dame fans feel like the team they got coming in is the best they've ever had. We've been hearing it for the last 3-4 years about Notre Dame football. They got a great defense. You finally look like you got a good quarterback in Riley Leonard. Well, up to this point of this season, Riley Leonard, it looks like he needs to be benched. He's like a poor man's Daniel Jones. Really good athlete, really good runner, but a really below average passer. Their offensive line hasn't played up to the standard that you normally expect a Notre Dame offensive line to play at. And this is a team that has already had an embarrassing loss to Northern Illinois, a team from the MAC. And it's not like Northern Illinois is anything special. They just lost last week to Buffalo coming off a bye. So Notre Dame, I don't think they got any chance of making it to the playoffs this year. And they got a few more embarrassing losses coming their way. They got Louisville coming up this week. I expect them to lose that game because their offense just doesn't have a pulse. They're not consistent. They struggle to beat Miami of Ohio. And I don't care how good these MAC teams are. When you're Notre Dame, you should be blowing these squads out of the water. And NC State, you know, we got 3 ACC teams on here. I think that shows just how bad the ACC has been this year. NC State, for the last couple of years, has been a really underrated program. They normally consistently have 8 to 9 wins. They're good defensively. They got a really good head coach that also is underrated as well. And this year, with them getting Grayson McCall, you thought that was going to be the missing piece for them actually being able to compete for the ACC title with teams like Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. However, their season has gone completely wrong. Grayson McCall, he's already injured, but even when he was healthy, he wasn't that great. They got blown out by Tennessee. They got blown out by Clemson. Clemson put 40 points on these boys' heads at halftime. For a team that people thought could be a sneaky dark horse contender this year, this is a team that right now, they don't have identity. It doesn't look like they can do too much of anything, and everything that was praised about them has been a complete polar opposite this year. The defense hasn't been good neither, and this just looks like a down year for the Wolfpack, and it's really disappointing because I kind of was one of the people a little bit on a hype train for NC State. I did think that they could kind of shake things up with how down the ACC was expected to be this year, but you know, they're part of the reason why this conference is the worst in college football. So these are my 5 teams that I believe haven't lived up to the hype so far this college football season. Leave your thoughts down below. Put down some teams that you believe haven't lived up to the hype. And, you know, let me know how you feel about this list. Now, the final thing I want to talk about before I get up on out of here, USC played their first official game as a member of the Big Ten, and they got a brutal welcome into the conference by Michigan, man. Michigan showed them what Big Ten football is all about. You got to be able to play big boy football. You got to be able to put those pads on, strap up that chin strap, and you got to be able to stop that ground game, man. And Michigan just absolutely bullied USC for 4 quarters. Their offensive line struggled to protect Michigan's outstanding defensive line. Anytime USC tried to run the football, it's like they were running into a brick wall. And they did have a couple of big runs in the second half that they were able to get off. But for the most part, it was tough sledding for this Trojans offense when it came to their run game. They also couldn't protect Miller Moss. They had to bench their starting left tackle at halftime because Josiah Stewart, number 0 on Michigan's defense, was out there looking like the second coming of Lawrence Taylor. This just was a brutal welcoming that Lincoln Riley and the Trojans got into what it means to be a team in the Big Ten Conference. You're playing grown man football when you go up against these Big Ten teams. You just can't be throwing all these RPOs, these screen passes, and think that that's going to cut it and win you a lot of games when you're playing teams like Michigan. If you want to be able to be a contender in this conference, you got to be able to play some smash mouth football. You got to be able to take a couple of these teams' lunch money. And USC right now, they're not where they need to be up front to be able to have a shot at winning the Big Ten this year. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be a bad team, but I think me and a lot of you Trojans fans should agree that that game against Michigan definitely was a wake-up call. And yeah, you only lost that game by a field goal. The fact that Michigan was able to have a 2-minute drive to take the lead late in that game, only running the football, kind of shows you that USC has some ways to go before they're ready to actually be able to be a factor when it comes to winning this conference. They're going to be a 9-win team this year. They may be able to get the 10 wins some way, somehow, because I do believe in the NIL. But as far as them being able to win the Big Ten title, there's no chance. Because you got to play Penn State. You got to play Rutgers, who right now has the highest graded offensive line in college football, according to PFF. Like, Lincoln Riley still has to change a little bit of his identity. He's moving in the right direction because all throughout the offseason, him and that staff were putting an emphasis on defense, physicality, getting stronger, gaining weight, but his play calling hasn't adapted to the play of Big Ten football. USC is a team that a lot of their most talented players are all on the perimeter. Their offensive line has struggled for the last couple of years, and until they can actually have a team that's ready to play some big boy football, they can run the football in the middle of a defense like Michigan, you're going to have a hard time against teams like Penn State, Rutgers, and Nebraska, because all these teams are built off the physicality that you need to play in the Big Ten. And USC just doesn't have it. They are kind of developing it. With the play calling that we saw out of Lincoln Riley, USC doesn't look tough enough for the Big Ten yet to win this conference. You know, like, if you want to be able to win in this conference, you got to be able to run the football. And USC wasn't able to do that against Michigan. And Lincoln Riley's play calling was really conservative. It was all about trying to beat Michigan on the perimeter. They couldn't really get a lot of big plays in the passing game like what we saw against LSU because Miller Moss didn't have that much time to throw the football. Until USC can get better up front and build the kind of offensive line that you need to play offense at a high level in this thing, and to have a defensive line that can keep a school like Michigan from running for damn near 1 million yards against you. Well, it's one thing to know that a team is running the football, but it's another when you can't stop it and you know it's coming. That shows you that that team just believes that they're more physical than you, and they believe that you don't have the toughness necessary to stop them. Michigan pretty much bullied USC for the entirety of that game. You know, and even though they got up, they got a little bit of momentum, Michigan was still able to go back to what works best, which is bully ball, and USC wasn't ready for it. What a brutal welcome that USC got into the Big Ten playing Michigan, man. But I appreciate all you guys for tuning in to this episode of JT Sports Live. Shout out to everybody that's in the chat. Shout out Zero Cool. He says you didn't see the game. Michigan didn't do. Man, come on, man. Come on, bro. Come on. Let's not do this now. Let's not do this blaming the refs for why they lost that game, man, because Will Johnson's pick six didn't have anything to do with the refs. Lincoln Riley's conservative play calling didn't have anything to do with the refs, man. Allowing Michigan to run the football down your throat for 290 yards didn't have anything to do with the refs, man. Like, officiating in college football has been bad all year round. But let's not act like the refs gave Michigan that game. What gave Michigan that game is the fact that USC couldn't tackle any of their damn running backs. I mean, how do you allow a team to have a 2-minute game-winning drive only running the football? They only threw the ball 12 times, man. Like, I love you, Zero Cool, but I can't hear anything about, I don't want to hear anything about the refs, man. Like, USC got bullied. Michigan took their lunch money. You know, I do agree that there were penalties that should have been called, but there were some penalties that should have been called on USC that could have benefited Michigan that weren't. USC had a chance to win that game. They were in control of that game in the second half. At one point, they outgained Michigan 200 and something yards to only 6. But listen, I love you, Zero Cool. I know you're a Trojans fan. I love the Trojans too, but the officiating has been bad all around in college football. At this point, there's no use complaining about it. At the end of the day, USC had a chance to win this game. They were up. They allowed Michigan to get back in it when Miller Moss threw that pick six to Will Johnson. it just wasn't a good matchup for USC. You know, they definitely did get a brutal awakening, because the fact that Michigan only threw the ball 12 times, completed 7 passes, kind of shows you, you know, the Big Ten is just a different kind of beast. But this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we go live. Remember, you can find this episode and all of our previous ones on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts from. Make sure you go ahead, check us out, give us a 5-star review. Send your questions in the DMs at Instagram at JT_Sports_ and on X at JT___. And I will see you guys.